Hello, Course 3 students, and welcome to our first video lesson. I'm so excited to actually be able to get into the material and get you guys going. And so we are going to be starting with Unit 1 and Lesson 1. What our objective is for today is I can evaluate algebraic expressions. So we're going to be talking about different types of algebraic expressions as well as understanding their different components. So the agenda for today is to review vocab words. So that was what we did the day prior, or today. The other part is that we have 3 examples on how to substitute in algebraic expressions. So, reviewing some of our vocab words, remember that an algebraic expression is something written like this, or it could be written as, x plus 2, where x equals 1. So somehow, when they're doing an algebraic expression, is meaning there's some sort of variable and there's all these other components. So your variable, like I kind of mentioned, your variable is that letter. So it's going to be your x, maybe sometimes there's a's, sometimes there might be n's. Your operation, so that's one of those, one of the 4 main operations. Or we're doing addition, subtraction, addition, I think I said addition twice, multiplication, division. So that would be your operation. Your constants. Constants are going to be any number that is by themselves. They are constant. They are kind of alone. So 7 and 5 in this case are both considered constants. And then your coefficient is that number that's going to be right next to the variable. So the coefficient and the variable. Okay, so that usually means when they're right next to each other, that means an operation of multiplication. And we usually don't indicate that with an actual operation symbol. So this is a good diagram to be looking at if you need help with remembering some of those vocab words that we kind of went through today. Alrighty, so let's look at some examples of evaluating these expressions. So we are going to evaluate these expressions, and our first example is with one variable. Okay, remember your variable is your letter part. And so to evaluate each expression for the given value of the variable. So that's why it's important to understand this. Evaluate is another word for solve. Basically solve the problem. Okay. So what we do is we are going to take this x equals 11 and plug it into my equation. So sometimes instead of saying plugging in, we say substitute in. So that was another word that we had talked about is substituting in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this equation, and instead of putting x, I'm going to put what x equals. Well, x equals 11. So instead of having x plus 5, I'm going to have 11 plus 5. And I solve that out. 11 plus 5, that gives me 16. And that is my solution. Okay, a lot of times when I do work, I end up boxing in my answers. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It just depends on if I remember. All right, and B then. So in B, or problem B, now remember these are the problems. These aren't actually the variables. These are just, okay, problem A, problem B. So for my variable here, again, I'm going to substitute in the number that is for that variable. So in this case, I would have 2. And 2 right next to 4 does not make 24. Remember, if they're right next to each other, it actually means an operation of a multiplication. So I'm going to have 2 times 4 plus 3. Now, in this case, it is going to be important that I know my order of operations, and that's why we decided to practice that a little bit. So multiplication comes before addition, so I'm going to multiply these out. 2 times 4 gives me 8, and then I'm going to add in the 3, and that gives me 11. So I now have it 11 as an answer. Okay, and so that is how I evaluate expressions with one variable. If you got questions at all when you're watching this video, feel free to email me about that. remember that we had discussed about having a code word, and sometimes these code words will be, you have to decode them, and sometimes I'll say them partly through the video. So you'll just have to make sure to keep up with that. So let's go to example 2. So example 2, actually I think I'm going to try and extend this page a little bit, just so I can see it a little better. Oh, I do not like how I did this. That's interesting. All right, we're just going to leave it like that. Okay, so example 2 then is evaluating expressions with 2 variables. So this time I now have 2 variables to solve out this problem. So it's a lot like the ones we did before, but now I have 2 different letters or 2 different variables. So in this first case, problem A, remember these are just the problems, I have a variable of x and I have a variable of y. My operation is addition, and remember I've got coefficients. That means that I'm going to multiply the 5 and the x and the 2 and the y. So again, I'm going to rewrite this. Do not try and do this in your head. Rewrite it out. Show out your work. So I'm going to plug in 13 for 5. So 5. And remember then the coefficient and the variable multiply each other when they're right next to each other. Plus then, because plus afterwards, and I have a 2 times y, or 2 times 13. Hey, they're both 13. That's not always the case, but so I'm going to do 5 times 13. 5 times 13 would be 65. And 2 times 13 is 26. Make sure I got that. Yep. Okay, so then if I add these together, well, 6 and 2 is 80, but then 5 and 6 is 11. So I'd have 91. All right. So that is my answer. Again, I'm solving the problem by substituting in what is that actual value for that variable. And then B here. I don't have as much room, so I'm going to do B over on the side here. So my work's going to go over here. So I have 2.5 times P. So I'm going to have 2.5 times, I'm going to try and make sure that I know that that's times. P, what is P? P is 12, so I'm going to plug in 12. Then minus 4 times whatever Q is. Q is 6.5. For some of these things that we go through, I'm okay if you want to use a calculator, but you could also definitely do this in your head, or use your work out write it out on a piece of paper. But if I do 2.5 times 12, that gives me 30. I'm still going to have this operation of subtraction. And then I need to figure out what is 6.5 times 4. 6.5 times 4 is 26. So 30 minus 26 gives me an answer of 4, and that is my solution for part E. Remember, I make mistakes as I go through. If I made a mistake on this, let me know. We can always discuss it in class. Alrighty, and your last problem here, okay? So our last problem is a little bit more of a word problem and an application problem. So example 3 says that physical science application. So we're going to actually take a look at some science stuff. So math is pretty cool because we get to look at a lot of different subject things within that subject. So sometimes we look at math or science things. Sometimes we're looking at like data that they collected for social studies about the region. So this one is about your degrees. So it says if C is a temperature in degrees Celsius, then 1.8 C plus 32 can be used to find the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. Convert each temperature from degrees Celsius to degrees Fahrenheit. So something I like to use is a thing called Power Math. Power Math makes you underline and circle certain parts of your problem. So I always go for your underline first, which is finding the actual problem. or the direction. So your actual problem or direction is to convert each temperature from degrees Celsius to degrees Fahrenheit. Then the other part is to know your operations or circle in your operations, or which is sometimes they're indirect when you're a little older. So sometimes it just ends up being boxing in some important things. So boxing in this equation will also be important. I'm going to rewrite it though, because they say that 1.8 C or Celsius plus 32 is going to then equal the Fahrenheit temperature. So here in the United States, we use Fahrenheit temperatures. So when you look at the temperature and you're like, oh, it's 82 degrees outside, that's in Fahrenheit. Almost every other country in the world, though, uses Celsius. And so they will say, oh, it's, this degrees out, and it'll actually seem a lot lower in your head because the conversion is a little different. And so your first one here says the freezing point of water. So the freezing point of water is 0 degrees in Celsius, okay? So remember that our actual problem was to convert all Celsius to Fahrenheit. So basically this means I'm taking this equation and I'm plugging in 0 for C, all right? So I'm going to take this equation so that we can figure out what F is, or figure out what the solution is. So I'd have 1.8 times 0, because that's the C, plus 32. Well, anything times 0 is 0. Oops, I think I wrote out 35. 32. Anything times 0 is 0, so 32. So if I was going to find what is the Fahrenheit degrees, it's going to equal 32. All right. Hey, your code word today is, or phrase is, math is cool. So make sure to put that in when you submit this, and so that I know that you watched it. All right, highest recorded temperature in the United States is 57 degrees Celsius. So again, it gives us what actually the degrees is in Celsius. So Celsius was 57. I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute it in for this equation. So 1.8 times 57. Sometimes I write it in a parentheses when I'm meaning the multiplication here. You can do either or you can write that multiplication symbol or that dot to symbolize that. Sometimes I just write with the parentheses. Plus 32 equals F. So I'm actually going to use a calculator for this. 1.8 times 57. Oh, that gives me, okay, 102.6 plus 32. Okay, so I'm going to add plus 32. All right. And so that means that once I get that, that is my solution. And so my answer is 34.6 degrees. Oh, that is a very hot day. I am curious what state that was in the United States. I would assume maybe Texas or Arizona, but maybe even California. Man, I would not want to be outside that day. As for that, that is the end of our video. So hopefully you have kept up with us. Feel free to always rewatch it if you need more directions on this. And I will see you guys tomorrow. We are going to be practicing some of the skills that we had just learned in this video. So make sure to come prepared with some paper and a pencil, and we will work on problems together as a class, as well as if you don't finish in class, it will end up becoming more homework for you. So make sure that you are following along, and I will see you then.